Welcome to Research Methodology. This is Module 2 in a 4-part series on research methodology prepared especially for students that are doing the doctor's degree in business administration. My name is Dr. Ian McKechnie, and in this module we'll be looking specifically at the literature review and research design. What is a literature review? A literature review is looking at previously published works just to see where our research fits in with previous research, what other researchers have looked at and have found in regard to the topic that we're looking at. So we define a literature review as a body of text. In other words, it is something that is written, and the aim of the literature review is to review previous research, to draw out the critical points of previous research and see how it fits in with our topic and with the knowledge and information we need, which will provide greater understanding of the background to our topic, to the research that's been done, what's gone before we're looking at, to see how that provides us with insight into the topic that we're looking at. So it is reviewing the body of knowledge that exists around our research topic. That's what a literature review is. What are some of the characteristics of a good literature review? The fact is we're looking at many authors. When we're doing a doctor's degree, we might be looking at anything up to 100 or even 150 different pieces of research and authors that have done research in our topic area. It's important, firstly, that when we draw all of this research together, that we present a logical flow of ideas. We want one review of one author to flow into the next one. So our style of writing must flow from one idea to another. It's not sufficient to say such and such an author said this, such and such an author said that. We must make sure that our flow of ideas is logical and it writes well, reads well, and sounds good. The other thing is that we need to make sure that we have a spread of references, both current references and older references. We must avoid the error of just using references which are perhaps 10 or 20 or 30 years old. We must make sure that we have current research that is up to date. Now, of course, we'll be looking at research that goes back many years, but we must make sure we have a balance. Also, when we do our referencing, we must make sure that we cite our references. We must have an appropriate and a consistent referencing style, and what we recommend is that we follow the Harvard system of referencing. We must also make use of proper terminology. We are doing a graduate piece of writing, so we must make sure that our terminology doesn't use slang. We must make sure that our grammar is good, and we must write with a sense of objectiveness and also with simplicity of writing. Our sentences don't have to be long, they don't have to contain many adjectives and complicated grammar. The important thing is to express ourselves in a professional manner. And also it's important too that when we do our literature review and when we look at previous research, that we report it in an unbiased manner. We don't want to express our opinions. We don't want to be opinionated in what we say. We don't want to just select references that support our ideas. We must make sure that we look at references that both seem to support what we're looking at and also take an opposite view. So we must make sure that our literature review is comprehensive and unbiased in its scope. Why do we do a literature review? What is the purpose of a literature review? Well, firstly, and very importantly, we need to make sure that the research we're doing has not already been done. We don't want to replicate, we don't want to look into something that has already been researched. So we do a literature review firstly to make sure that we're not unnecessarily replicating research that has already been carried out. Secondly, research helps to frame our approach to our research, to identify the key issues, the key terms, the key concepts, and also to help us design our research, how we're going to go about our research, what information we need to gather from what sources and what areas we're looking at. So, as we say in research terminology, it informs our research design and our approach to our method. Importantly also, it provides a contextual background to our research. It helps, previous research helps to put our research into some sort of context. Where does our research stand in relation to research that's already been done? Also, literature review helps us to identify the different theories that surround our research. It's important to understand what theories currently exist that provide some sort of that inform the research that we're doing. And of course it provides us with background information to our research as well. And also we do a literature review to identify other researchers that are interested in the same subject. And often we will find that the same names keep coming up, that other researchers will refer back to particular researchers. And when we are doing our literature review, it's only a matter of time that we are able to identify the leading researchers in our particular area. Now this is important because leading researchers in our area of research obviously have had some very important and significant things to say. So of course we would take particular notice of those researchers who appear to be well versed and specialise in the area that we're looking at. We also do a literature review to help identify gaps in our own knowledge about a topic. When we select a topic to research, it doesn't mean that we have learnt everything that we need to know about that particular topic or that particular area out of a textbook. Doing a doctoral degree means that we're learning on the job, that as we do a literature review, we are learning. We are going to a great depth to see what other researchers have done in this particular area. And in doing so, we are teaching ourselves, as it were, and gathering knowledge about our particular area. So doing a literature review helps to fill in the gaps in our own knowledge about the topic area that we're looking at. Also, it helps us to identify what the basic ideas are about the subject that we're looking at. And this is important because we need to make sure that we're not looking at a topic which is out of date. We're not looking at researching an area where knowledge has already moved on, where researchers have already moved on. We don't want to be looking at a topic area which is out of date. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we are researching something which is important to contemporary, in our case, contemporary business. That it is a subject which perhaps business or practitioners in particular areas of business are concerned about, are thinking about. And so we want to make sure that our research is up to date, it is contemporary, it is relevant to today's business world. How then do we go about doing our literature review? Where do we find this previous research? Well, some very important areas to look at to do our research is firstly professional journals and papers. These professional journals are journals which are written for particular areas of profession within business. journals that relate to human resource management, production management, accounting, management, HR, supply chain management. There are many, many professional journals that are written for the professional. And by that we're not talking about what we call popular magazines. We're not talking about magazines like Fortune magazine or Time or Newsweek or Barron's or magazines that are written for the popular reader. We're talking about journals that are produced for people that work in a particular professional area. We also look at conference papers that have been presented at conferences, because these are a rich source of information, especially in relation to current thinking in a particular topic area. We also look at past theses. We look at what other researchers have written about the topic, and a thesis is a good place to go to. We can look at serious magazines. Magazines, for example, like The Economist, which has a reputation for good, solid and accurate reporting. And of course we can use any other academic and professional sources as well. The important thing is that we are looking for facts, we're not looking for opinions. So it's important that in our literature review we are drawing out factual information from good, reliable sources. Which takes us on to where not to do our literature review, and such sources as newspapers or popular magazines, the sort of magazines you see on the news stalls. These are normally sources of opinion. Newspapers are written not just to provide facts, but to provide entertainment. Newspapers and popular magazines are printed to attract readers. So we've got to, as we said before, sort out what is factual and what is entertainment and what is opinions. Also, textbooks have a limited use, because although textbooks do rely on previous research, often we find that even current textbooks are relying on research which is several years old. And also another area which we would encourage you to avoid, and that is popular business books. Business books that feature in bookshops, perhaps in an area which is related to yours, but again we've got to remember that many of these books are very, very opinionated and are not based on previous research, but are based on one person's opinion or perhaps one person's experience. We must be very, very careful in using these sources for our literature review. For doctoral students, one of the best sources of information is e-libraries, because e-libraries provide us with the latest up-to-date research that's been done, especially from professional journals and magazines. And most researchers these days will use e-libraries. Most researchers today don't use what we call traditional paper libraries, because most of the material there is out of date. And most libraries now are relying upon e-libraries as a source of research material for researchers. Net Academy subscribe to the two best e-libraries in the world, and that is Emerald e-Library and EBSCO e-Library. And this provides us with rich sources of up-to-date, comprehensive research material. E-libraries work very similar to searching a search engine or doing a Google search. When we go to an e-library, we find there that we are asked to provide a search word or search words that enable the e-library to go through their database and to come up with articles that are relevant to the topic that we want. So normally we start with a general search word. This is especially so if we are thinking in terms of what topic are we going to research. We might, for example, want to look at some area of human resource management. So we might put human resource management as our search word. And that will bring up, of course, thousands and thousands of articles. And in going through these articles, in moving through these articles, this will then help us to stimulate our thinking, stimulate our ideas, and help us to narrow our research topic. Just to provide an example of this, say for example that our general area of research is in the area of customer service. We're thinking we might like to look at some particular area of customer service. Then we would use customer service as our initial search word to go into Emerald Library or EBSCO Library. Perhaps after looking at a number of articles, we decided that we would like to narrow our research topic field down to perhaps handling customer complaints. We would then use those words as our search words to narrow our area of search down so that the libraries will then provide us with references that are only relevant to that area of customer complaints. When we start looking at our topic area, we will perhaps be looking broadly at the area that we are interested in. But it's important that we look fairly broadly at our topic area. Just don't confine yourself to looking at your specific area, because as you start looking at articles, you will find that articles will come up which perhaps relate to other areas. So make sure that when you're looking for research material, you just don't look at something that is directly relevant and specific to your research area. We say that when you're doing research, you've got to be like a detective. You've got to look broadly. You've got to think of all the issues surrounding your particular topic. And it may be that your topic, although it is a business topic, it may relate to such areas as history, perhaps business history, economic history. It may relate to psychology, the way people think, sociology, the way people organise themselves in the society. So we need to make sure that we just don't confine ourselves to our narrow topic area, but we see the issue broadly. We see that our topic area is within the context, perhaps, of society or human interactions or relationships. So we need to make sure that our research is beyond the topic. We need to see the issues and the environment in which our topic relates. Also, don't confine yourself to your particular country. If you're looking at customer complaints in an industry in Malaysia, just don't look at Malaysian industry. Look at all countries where there are customer complaints. Of course, there are customer complaints in every country of the world. But just don't confine yourself to your country. Also, don't confine yourself just to the business you're looking at. If you're looking at customer complaints in the telecommunications area in Malaysia, don't confine yourself just to Malaysia. Don't confine yourself just to the telecommunications area. Look at other industries. Look at other countries. Make sure that your research is wide and broad and has a broad perspective. Let's just illustrate what I was saying by giving an example. And let's say, for example, that our broad research topic is on customer service. Having done our literature review and thought about what we've read, we've decided that we are going to narrow our research down to handling customer complaints in the airline industry. Now, as we said before, make sure you look broadly and widely at this particular topic. Look at customers in the airline industry, not just in perhaps Malaysian context, or perhaps the context of the country where you're studying, but look at customers and the airline industry in all countries. Look at customers and complaints in all industries, in all countries. Customer complaints also has to have to do with people's psychology. Why do people complain? What makes people happy? How do people react when they're unhappy? All of these areas are often covered by psychology, industrial psychology. So make sure that you widen your research not beyond business research journals to other areas, such as psychology or maybe sociology, because complaints is often done in the context of a group. Often we complain about things because we feel that the group expects us to. So we need to look at the sociological aspects of customer complaints. Also, we need to look at some history too. How have customer complaints been dealt with in the past? Customer complaints is not something which is new to today's business. It's something which has happened over many, many decades, even many, many centuries. How has it been handled in the past? Look at some history. Look at some of the other influences on consumer behaviour. Things like geography, where people live. Look at climate, look at culture, look at the politics, look at economic factors, look at the difference between people complaining that live in a city area compared to a rural area. Look at customer complaints in the context of perhaps expensive items and cheap items. Items that are essential for life and inessential. What we're trying to illustrate here is research needs to be seen from a broad context. So make sure that your research is broad. The important thing, one of the very important things about doing research is your topic. Students often find that they spend more time trying to find a topic for their research than perhaps they spend on any other part of their research. The important thing is that you narrow your topic down to three things. Firstly, something that is able to be researched. Make sure that it is a researchable topic. Make sure that you can get data. Make sure you have access to data. Make sure you're not researching something which would require you to perhaps go overseas to collect data. Make sure it is something that you are able to research. The second thing is, make sure that your topic, make sure your research is going to provide us with some new knowledge and insights. We don't want to research something that's already been researched. We don't want to look into something that isn't going to provide us with any new knowledge or insights. That's why it's important to do a literature review, to see what others have researched and what they have found, to make sure that what we are going to research is something that is going to provide us with some new insight into this particular area. And make sure that you don't choose a topic that's so broad that the answer is already available. An example of that might be methods of interviewing prospective employees for a job. Now, we can go to any textbook and we can find the answer to that. So don't take a topic that is so broad that we already know the answer to it. You need to pick a topic that requires research that is going to provide us with new knowledge and new insights. In defining our research topic, we need to get to the point where we can express in one clear sentence what our research topic is. And as we said, we might start with a broad topic. Our interest might be in the area of customer service. But then as we do a literature review and we think further through the topic, we then narrow our topic, which is very important, to perhaps customer complaints. But that's not sufficient. We need to narrow it to a point where we are going to examine something about customer complaints, some particular area or aspect of customer complaints which is going to provide us with some new knowledge or new insight. So perhaps out of our narrower topic of customer complaints, we decide that we are going to look at a particular area which we can express in one sentence. And that may be examining the effectiveness of the handling of customer complaints in the airline industry in Malaysia. So there we're looking at something very, very specific. And in one sentence we have summed up what our research is all about. And that is very, very important that we get to that point, because it is from that point that we can move through the rest of our research. Also at this point, we have identified the concepts that are going to need some defining, some deeper understanding, some greater explanation for enabling us to actually going ahead with our research. And in that topic sentence, examining the effectiveness of the handling of customer complaints in the airline industry in Malaysia, we've got to then define, we've got to then understand what these concepts are. What do we mean by, for example, examining? How are we going to examine? What are we going to examine? How are we going to go about this process of examining? So we need to define what we mean by examining. What do we mean by effectiveness? How do we measure whether a customer complaint is effectively or ineffectively handled? What do we mean by the handling of customer complaints? Do we mean the handling of customer complaints by the after-sales service department, or by the marketing department, or perhaps even by the engineering department? In relationship to the airline industry, complaints might come from several sources at several points. There may be complaints in the check-in area. There might be complaints in the baggage area. There might be complaints of people on the airline during a flight, to stewardesses, stewards. There may be complaints to management within the airline industry. So complaints come from different areas, and complaints are handled in different ways by different people. So that needs to be explained, and we need to define what we mean by this whole area of customer complaints and where they come from and who handles them. The airline industry, what do we mean? Are we talking about companies that fly planes, or are we talking in the broader context? Malaysia, do we mean all of Malaysia? Do we mean West Malaysia, East Malaysia? Do we mean a particular part of Malaysia? These things need explaining, they need defining, they need examining, because unless we understand what these mean, we can't go ahead and measure. We can't go ahead and collect data because we don't know where to collect data from, and we don't know what to measure. When we're talking about effectiveness, how do we measure effectiveness? Unless we understand what we mean by effectiveness, we can't then work out how we're going to measure it. So it's important that we understand these concepts so that, as we say, we can operationalise them. We can put together surveys, questionnaires to enable us to collect the data that is necessary to examine this particular topic problem. An important part of our research is asking research questions. Now, these research questions are a part of our thesis. After we've done our literature review, we then decide what sort of questions do we want answered through our research. And asking research questions also helps us to ask ourselves whether we really understand what we are measuring and examining through our research. Now, our research questions will normally only be confined to about 3 or 4 questions, and that's enough to answer in the context of the thesis. But those research questions provide us as researchers with real understanding of what we really understand about what we're researching. What questions do we want answered through the research that we are going to do? We're going to collect data, we're going to examine that data, and that data should actually provide us with the basis of answering our research questions. So at the end of our study, having collected our data, analysed our data, and discussed our research, we then should be at a point where we can answer our research questions. And we've said our research questions need to have a razor-sharp focus to what we're intending to study and how we are going to go about doing that study. not only will we be forming research questions, but also we're going to be suggesting some answers to our research. And this is what's called an hypothesis. Hypotheses, of course, is plural for hypotheses. So what we will have is we will have a number of hypotheses which are suggested explanations to the research that we're going to do. In other words, they will be guesses as to what the outcome will be of our research. And these guesses will be based upon our literature review and what other researchers have found. And the guesses that we make in our hypothesis will be based not upon the feelings or the intuition we may have, but it will be reasoned on the basis of what other researchers have found. Now, thinking back to the first research question that we provided in our example about the influence of staff training on customer complaints and how they're handled effectively or ineffectively, a hypothesis would be formed on the basis or in relation to the research question. And a hypothesis may be, or the educated guess that we may have, based upon previous research and what we have learnt and understood about what other researchers have found about the relationship between staff training and the handling of customer complaints. Our hypothesis or our guess might be expressed in these words, that higher levels of staff training will have a positive effect on the satisfactory outcome of the handling of customer complaints. Now, we're not saying that this is going to be our outcome. What we're saying is this is what we're guessing our research will show. And in collecting the data, our data will either support or not support that hypothesis. But at this stage, what we're doing is we're providing some sort of educated guess as to what we will find from our research. And we should emphasise that this is not something that we are setting out to prove. We are setting it out to examine whether this hypothesis is correct or not correct. This now takes us to the end of this particular module. And in the next module, we will be ready to discuss forming our research design and our model. What does this mean? How do we go about it? We'll be looking at various research methodologies. There are different ways of going about our research. We will be looking at that. Also, we will examine how we're going to go about collecting and examining our data, and the sort of techniques that are used to gather data and to examine what are the most appropriate for our research topic.